Kamala Harris would have been the most anti-Christian president ever, superseding only Joe Biden, who was the most anti-Christian president we've ever had. Who's the worst cabinet secretary in Trump 2? That was everybody in Trump 1. We are winning in ways I never would have imagined that I would see in my lifetime on the immigration rhetoric and messaging. A huge tangible win is just shuttering USAID. You want America to be feared by its enemies and respected by its allies. The first political party in the United States of America that makes it possible for families to purchase a home and hold it on a single income will rule our country for the next 50 years. Again, I think the point of this conversation is to tell the black pillars to take a reality pill. You need to get reality pilled here. No black pilling, but always chimp.
Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out hard conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast, and I am back after a bit of a hiatus. Of course, I threw out one special episode interviewing Monty Fritz, who is running currently for governor of Tennessee. But outside of that episode, you haven't seen me for a long, long time, so it's good to be back. That being said, these first few episodes back, I am doing a bit of an overview to catch some of you up on what has happened in the broader cultural, political landscape. That being said, I have brought on my good friend, William Wolfe, from the Center of Baptist Leadership to join me in this discussion. So, William, before we dive in, go ahead and just give yourself an introduction to the audience for those who are not yet familiar.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Great to be here with you today. I appreciate all the work that you do with this podcast and many other things as well. As you said, I'm the executive director of the Center for Baptist Leadership, which I started about a year and a half ago. And prior to that, I spent a decade living and working in Washington, D.C. I worked for 3 different members of Congress, including Dave Bratt. Some people will know that name, great guy. And worked at the Heritage Foundation's political arm, Heritage Action, 4 years in the first Trump administration at the State Department and the Department of Defense, working on legislative affairs for both of those agencies. I'm a 2-time graduate of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I have my MDiv and my THM. And so pulling all of that together, the main thing I talk about is really the intersection of faith and politics, how we can make America great again and make America Christian again.
Amen to that. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and we're going to dive into all of those various subjects that I know you are well equipped to discuss. So I want to kind of begin our conversation. There's a lot of blackpilling going on right now. For those listeners who are not on the internet all the time, like William and I, there's a lot of people that are doomer posting out there. They really think that it is so over. They think that the Trump administration is completely failing. And really, there's just a lot of negativity going on online. Now, there are certainly some legitimate criticisms. For those of you who will catch the episode, I've recorded with Mark Mitchell. I'm sure you're going to hear quite a bit of that. There's some legitimate criticisms out there, but I really think it's important to understand where we're at by first looking back at where we were. So that's where I want to start our conversation. I want to talk about what it looked like in 2021 when the Biden administration first took office. So I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a recap of where we were then, and then I'll turn it over to you, William, to add anything additional you want. So 2021, Biden has taken office, the most secure, perfectly run, fantastic election in the entire American history. Of course, no disputing that, none whatsoever. Of course, Biden not only has won the White House, but there is also a Democrat Senate and a Democrat House. And of course, J6 happened, the worst day in history, worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor. And as a result of that, conservatives are facing a crackdown from the DOJ. There are people that are getting arrested. There are people having their doors broken down. There are people being interrogated. There are people who are not even at the Capitol that are now facing prison time for January 6th and whatever alleged behaviors have gone on. Of course, all this time later, we know that there are roughly about 300 plainclothes federal agents in the crowds. There's so much that we could say about J6, but it was a dark time. There were a lot of people that were honestly dipping out of the political scene. I know the great Charlie Kirk talked a lot about how they were backed into a corner. A lot of people were dipping out from Turning Point. So really conservatives had their head on a swivel, just looking for who's going to be under the gun next. And then, of course, I want to talk about what was actually happening on the policy front. See, of course, we had the Democrats running the House and the Senate, and they were trying their best to kill the filibuster. And had they killed the filibuster, their plan was to, of course, make Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. into two heavily blue states, which would have given them two heavily blue senators, which would effectively have given them a permanent majority in the Senate. Of course, it would have added on a few electoral votes as well as some heavily blue-leaning congressional districts. So that probably would have made their chances of keeping a permanent majority in the House, much better as well. And then, of course, let's talk about how they wanted to pack the Supreme Court. That's another thing that they could not do because of the filibuster. And they would have, of course, added as many justices as they needed to completely shrink the conservative majority that was delivered to us by the Trump administration's first term. And then, of course, they were hoping to make their mail-in voting of the most secure election, 2020, permanent through legislation that could not pass because of the filibuster. And lastly, they were talking about passing mass amnesty. Now, of course, let's talk about the filibuster for a second. Why did the filibuster not get passed? Because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, two moderate Democrat senators, refused to kill the filibuster. Now, had those two killed the filibuster, all of those doomsday scenarios that I painted would have happened. That would have been our scenario. But by God's mercy and God's mercy alone, Sinema and Manchin had steel spines and they did not cave on it, even though they were being harassed night and day by the left-wing media. Kyrsten Sinema was even chased into a bathroom by these left-wing activists and being physically threatened. And then, of course, to our great mercy, the Lord's great mercy, they did not cave. And we fortunately barely managed to flip the House in the midterms and were able to hold on until, of course, Trump came back in 2024. So that is where we were. It's important to understand how close we were to seeing transformational change to the country that would have taken a miracle to undo. So, William, feel free to add on to that. I just think it's important to really give that perspective before we go into the positives of what has happened in the Trump second administration. So feel free to add on to anything.
Yeah, I mean, great recap. I just wonder if these people have even said thank you once for the fact that one man has actually stood athwart history and not just said stop, but actually stopped things in the last decade. And that's Donald Trump. I had a pretty viral post just a little bit ago saying, before you doom and blackpill, consider the last 20 years, consider the scope of history here in the 21st century, in which it's all been grinding towards the total destruction of America as we know it. We had Bush, George W. Bush, we had 9/11, and then it's just like downhill from there. Massive expansion of the security state, getting mired down in these democracy, building quests in Afghanistan and Iraq. The collapse of the markets in 2008. Obama comes in completely radical, and people really don't understand how radical Obama was. When I was considering the recent events in Minneapolis, and I will say the tragic death of Renee Good, I believe she brought it on herself, but it's still a tragedy. I almost posted, if you want to blame somebody, blame Obama, because he's the one who really sowed all these revolutionary seeds that are sprouting now in the current environment. And so against Obama, we run McCain, we run Romney, total losers. And then we get the Tea Party. And then out of that, really, we get Donald Trump. And Donald Trump coming down that escalator in 2015 and stepping away from a cushy life and putting himself in the public eye, now to this point where he's been a survivor of an attempted assassination. He's been thrown in jail and charged with dozens of ridiculous and fraudulent felonies for simply trying to save our country. I mean, just have you even said thank you one time? And really, after that first Trump administration you covered, Biden was so disastrous. Like, Trump never got a real first term because he didn't know what he was getting into. He didn't have a good team. Pick the worst person you think is the current cabinet secretary that's failing at their job. I'm not going to name anybody, but you think of who it is. Who's the worst cabinet secretary in Trump 2? That was everybody in Trump 1, minus a few exceptions, right? He was being backstabbed everywhere, Russian collusion, doesn't get a first term. Biden takes us way into the ditch. And Trump, now a year in, is slowly but surely trying to dig us out. And some people could say, oh, well, now is not the time for half measures. And I agree. But before you judge somebody on how much progress they've made digging out of a hole, you need to ask yourself just how deep it is. And with that history you gave and that more expansive history I just gave, it's a really deep hole we're in here.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, I think it's very easy to lose that perspective when we are following the news cycle because things change so rapidly. But it's really worth going back and honestly being thankful, just praising the Lord for his mercies and the fact that he has used Trump and the Trump administration, all the cabinet officials, to do as much as they have done. And we'll, of course, get into some of those victories in a moment. I do want to expand a little bit upon a Kamala presidency, sort of a what if scenario, because I think it's important to bring that into the conversation as well when we're considering how good we do have it. So I guess I'll just turn it over to you, William, just to dive into anything you want to add to what we could have seen under a Kamala presidency if the 2024 election had gone completely different.
Yeah, I mean, we would have seen the continuation of the disaster of the Biden administration, but on steroids. They would have managed to turn it up. As bad as Biden was, it would have gotten even worse. Biden was essentially a puppet president. There's no way around that, right? He wasn't the one really calling the shots, but he was staffed by absolute radical Marxists. They're Bolsheviks. They're people executing a color revolution on the United States of America. And really, it's not uncommon for staffers maybe to be more radical than their bosses sometimes, right? Like, I think Stephen Miller is probably more radical than Donald Trump, and he has to rein the guy in. I wish he wouldn't. I wish he'd let him go. But the scenario with Biden was all of these staffers were like multiple ticks more leftist than he was. With Kamala, it would have been even worse. She would have been even more incompetent. We would have been a laughing stock on the national stage, on the global stage. And then on top of that, we would have had Tim Walz a heartbeat away from the presidency. So consider what's happening in Minnesota and ask yourself, do I want that at the national level? And that's what you would have gotten. Our religious freedoms would have been taken away. Our First Amendment freedoms would have been crushed. People would be getting locked up for posting memes, for dissenting opinions on social media. There would have been another round of prosecutions against Donald Trump. This time, because he wouldn't have been running for office, he would have been a failed presidential candidate if she had won. There's a good chance he would have gone away and died in prison. Like, look at what they're doing to Bolsonaro in Brazil. And imagine that is what they would have done to Donald Trump and every single one of his allies that they could have had Kamala Harris won. It would have been dark, dark days.
Yeah, well said. I think it's important to factor that into this conversation. So let's go ahead and dive into the first year of Trump 2.0, because right now, that's the main focus. I mean, realistically, I do think it's important to frame it for our audience. Right now, I do think that Republicans are currently on the track to lose the House and the Senate in the midterms. But of course, we have almost a full year until those elections. And as they say, a year in politics is a history. It's years. So of course, a lot could change between now and the midterm elections. But I do also, with that, want to also give the disclaimer that for those who are not really one to follow elections, it is normal for the party in power to lose the midterm elections. So Republicans are already facing an uphill battle. Now, there are many individuals who think that they are doing all that they can to drop the ball, specifically congressional Republicans. We can talk about that more in a moment. But despite us not necessarily being in a great position for the midterms, I think that because people are looking at the midterms with a lot of concern, they are discounting the actual victories that have taken place. So, William, I'll just turn it over to you to start listing off some of those victories, and I'll just add to your list if I think of any.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think you're making a really good point. And before I talk about the victories of the Trump administration, which have been won almost exclusively on the weight of executive orders and administrative action, we really do need to bifurcate what's happening between the Trump administration and the Republican-controlled Congress, because we have an incredibly narrow majority in the House and the Senate. But technically, we still control the House and the Senate. Technically, I say that. But we've had a historically unproductive Congress. And I have to say, it really does seem like they are pining for the minority. And here's why. I want to explain this to your listeners. It's so easy to be in the minority. It is so sweet and comfy and cozy and easy to be in the minority. You can't control anything. All you have to do is be a press release Republican. Look at what the left is doing. Look at what they're doing. And if you put us back in power, then we'll stop it. Right? So they get a fundraise, they get a message, and there's no accountability for the failures because they're not the ones in charge. And that really seems to be what they want. I know they would never say it like that, but that's what it looks like. It's been a historically unproductive Congress. I think maybe they passed a total of 40 bills in the first year, which is historically low. They've only done one reconciliation package, and they could have done two by now, and they haven't. The major reforms that are needed, which are running into the filibuster in the Senate, but we're not seeing any fight in the Senate on things like the SAVE Act to secure our elections and other things like that. And so the biggest congressional win we could say that we've had is the One Big Beautiful Bill, which did provide a lot of funding for the Trump administration to execute on the priorities for which it was elected to execute upon, primarily on securing the border, with a huge increase in funding for DHS and ICE and Customs and Border Patrol to hire more agents, to build the border wall, to do things like that, hire more immigration judges. And so on the issue of immigration, which really is one of Trump's signature issues, I think he's actually done incredibly well. I was just double checking the stats. I'm sure they've ticked up by now, but the Department of Homeland Security is claiming that we've had a year of record-breaking achievement of more than 2.5 million illegal aliens leaving the U.S. A little over 600,000 of them were actual handcuffed deportations, and the rest of them were self-deportations, which actually is a really good way to get rid of them. We need to make it completely inhospitable for you to be here in the United States of America legally so that you leave. So that's a big win. So on immigration, it's been a big win. We really need to ratchet those up. We need to ratchet up the deportations, the actual deportation numbers. And there's a couple other things we could talk about that could be done there. But on immigration, I would say that's probably the place where Trump is doing the best. And then we could talk, I don't know if you want to pause there or get into other issues.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I want to doubly emphasize as well is the lack of leadership from congressional Republicans. Currently in the state of Tennessee, we have two members of Congress that are running to be our governor, John Rose from the House, and then, of course, Senator Marsha Blackburn from the Senate. And both of them are, of course, running to replace Bill Lee. And I was talking to one of those candidates the other day, and I specifically told them, I said, your main issue is that you're going to have to somehow sell Tennesseans on why you should be elected right now, because right now, when they look at Congress, the base is absolutely frustrated with Congress. They see individuals sitting on their hands. They see very little fight. They see very little activity. They don't see the Doge cuts, for example, getting made permanent. They don't see any of Trump's executive orders, for that matter, being made permanent. And so really individuals here in Tennessee are looking at this primary election, and we see two individuals from Washington, D.C. Congress running for our governor's mansion. And these same individuals in the base are just asking themselves, why should I vote for someone who's not doing anything currently? And now, of course, I want to give some grace to John Rose and to Marsha Blackburn. They are some of the best people that we have up there. But either way, whether they like it or not, their reputation to a small degree is tied to Congress, and this Congress is currently solely in their name. So I just thought I'd throw that out there before we go on.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a place where I would say I'm more black-pilled than anywhere else, it's on Congress. Like, Congress is so broken and ineffective that really what Trump has been able to accomplish without the help and the support and the backing of Congress is even more phenomenal when you put it in that context. Again, we can give them credit for the One Big Beautiful Bill. But they're in the appropriations process again, and they're going to fund a whole bunch of other terrible, programs again that they don't need to be funding. And they really don't have control of their caucus. We need a really strong like transformative leader in the House or in the Senate, one of the two or both, obviously, and we just don't have it. I mean, I think we had 17 Senate Republicans vote against codifying the Doge cuts recently, which is just a total betrayal of the American people. And this is why, of course, as you mentioned, just historically, the party that's in power performs poorly in the midterms, right? But you have to also, Republicans over the last decade have performed poorly without Trump on the ballot, right? So it's like that we have not yet been able to sort of crack the whip and catch the congressional Republicans on the House and the Senate up to the Trump era. And so it's a real mess there, man. Congress is a mess. That's probably where I don't know what we do to fix that. We need like a Trump for Congress to fix that at some point.
Absolutely. And I'm sure if I was to try to project my own feelings on John Rose and Marsha Blackburn, I'm sure both of them would probably list that exact same reason as to why they're both coming back to the state of Tennessee to run for governor. So I want to make sure that I am fair to both of them, because I'm not planning on making an endorsement in that race. But I do think that all of the candidates running are going to be an improvement from current leadership as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, let's go ahead and go back to some of these wins that the Trump administration has laid out for us. So obviously securing the border. I mean, we went from about 20 million roughly, we don't know the exact number, under Biden coming into the country, to now we are finally at net negative immigration for the first time in generations. So pick up there from anything else you want to add on to about immigration.
Yeah, so on immigration, it really has been an incredible story that's moving in two pieces. The first piece is we are winning in ways I never would have imagined that I would see in my lifetime on the immigration rhetoric and messaging, right? So the memes, the edits, even the language that they're using in terms of talking about remigration. I mean, remigration was this phrase that was used on like the fringe corners of the Euro right and in some like dark corners of the American right as well. And it's not a scary word at all. It's not a problematic word. It's not a dirty word. It's the moderate option. We have millions of people who have come here illegally, who are taking complete advantage of American taxpayers, circumventing, flaunting our laws, are not citizens of this country, and they need to return to where they came. The other option, and I'm not advocating for this at all, just trying to help people understand, the other option is like we round them up and put them in detention centers indefinitely. That's like the extreme option. We're not proposing that. In fact, this administration is offering them essentially a cash bonus and a free flight back to where they came from. So take it. If you're here illegally, take it. Don't wait for ICE to roll up on you. Take the bonus and the flight and go home. And we've got to get these people out of here. It's completely unsustainable. So talking about remigration is a huge win. Talking about like having our homeland again is a huge win. But the immigration rhetoric is still outpacing the immigration action. And one of the things I wanted to say here on your show in particular is that ultimately MAGA cannot live on memes and edits alone. We have to have real action to match it. And so I think in terms of getting the funding and making the hires to increase ICE operations, that's fantastic. One of the things that I really want to see in 2026 is a crackdown on the businesses. I mean, we can go door to door. We can round people up. We can go to favelas and, Mexican restaurants and get the illegal workers out of there. But what we need to do, what this administration needs to do, is crack down on the American businesses that are hiring illegal aliens to work for them at under the table labor and wage rates that undercut American businesses. So that would be a huge thing that they need to do in this next year. That said, it's just huge. It's a huge win. We're seeing a change. We're seeing net positive jobs going to Native American born citizens as opposed to foreign labor. We're seeing crackdowns even on the other sort of on legal immigration. I mean, we're beginning to talk about legal immigration and legal immigration sort of as the same thing, which in many ways they are, which is the subversion of the American people. And cracking down on H-1B visas and other visa programs. The State Department, I saw today that they've revoked 100,000 visas. So there's 100,000 people who were here legally that have to go home now. We've lowered the refugee admissions cap to levels that are drastically lower than even the lowest level in the first Trump administration. And I know that issue well because I worked on it at the State Department. So it's just amazing to me. So immigration is a huge win. There's more to be done because this really is the most like existential, civilizational level threat for America. and it's going to be ugly. And we just have to have the steel in our spine to execute and make it happen, or we will not get our country back.
Mm. You mentioned legal immigration, and of course, in your line of work, you encounter a wide variety of opinions from American evangelicals. So usually, when American evangelicals hear that we're cracking down on legal immigration, that's where things really start to get sketchy for a lot of these individuals. So maybe explain for a moment the different types of legal immigration and kind of why the American right has taken issue with certain types of legal immigration. And then, of course, feel free to refute any of the common arguments that you get, because I'm sure many individuals who listen to this podcast hear these arguments as well, and I'm sure that you could help equip our audience to better understand these issues.
Sure. Let me try not to take too much time here, because we want to keep talking about other wins, and there are other wins to talk about. But really, I use this quote a lot. It's not original to me. I got it from Michael Anton in The Stakes, the book The Stakes: America at the Point of No Return. And in it, he says, at the end, he says, the only question that matters when it comes to immigration, legal or illegal, is does it benefit the American citizens? And that is the right framework. And that's the right framework for us as American Christian citizens. The fact that we're Christians does not negate our American citizenship and the duties and the responsibilities that we have to one another as Americans here in this country. In fact, I would argue that when you factor in Christian virtues and a right ordering of loves, as we can see in Scripture, 1 Timothy 5:8 and other places, in terms of caring for your own family first and extrapolating that out to your American citizens, that we should actually be at the front lines in defending our American citizen neighbors, loving our neighbors who are being undercut not just by illegal immigration, who are being hurt not just by drug trafficking and cartel violence, who are being hurt and injured by illegal immigrants driving trucks in places they shouldn't be, but by legal immigrants who come. They don't cross the border illegally. They get a visa, but then maybe they overstay it. They're maybe not qualified for the visa that they get. They got a visa in such a way that they shouldn't have, because these American businesses are offering jobs to legal immigrants without actually looking at the American worker talent pool, because it's fundamentally cheaper for them to hire this labor. That's really what it comes down to, is the both the illegal and the legal immigrant worker class in America are fundamentally like slave labor classes. Yes, some of the legal immigration, H-1B, they get decent salaries. Some of them might get six-figure salaries, but they're like tied to these employers. They don't really have sort of sovereignty and ability to move about. And what it does is it takes jobs away from American citizens. It creates competition in the housing market. It puts a stress on our medical, our medical services, our health insurance companies. I mean, you name it. There's really not a single problem plaguing American citizens that could not be ameliorated by just total immigration moratorium and a mass reduction of the presence of aliens, legal or illegal, here. And that would actually be a loving thing to do for our American citizen neighbors, and particularly for the next generation. Like it's our generation and the next generation that is facing this stiff competition in the way that the baby boomers are not. And so we need to free up jobs for American citizens. And I'll tell you what, whether it's agriculture, whether it's tourism, whether it's tech, whatever it is, these industries owe it. It's a duty. It's not DEI. It's a duty to American citizens to pay them a fair and living wage, and to not be going, outside of our country to undercut them with cheaper foreign workers. Like, that's just not how a country works. They have a duty. These companies are American companies, and they should understand themselves as needing to be productive, actors and institutions in American life, which comes with duties and responsibilities to American citizens that they've totally forsaken and trampled. And we need to fix that whole thing.
Amen. Well said. Well, of course, immigration is probably one of the largest wins that we are just only able to scratch the surface tonight. From there, what do you think is the next biggest win that's come out of the Trump 2.0 first year?
Yeah, well, real quick, in a huge tangible win is just shuttering USAID.
Hmm.
I mean, that's another one that, dude, when I was at the State Department in the first Trump administration, the first Secretary of State for Trump, Rex Tillerson, former, oil executive, he tried to institute this like reorganization and reduction in force in the State Department and USAID. It was like he was trying to find like 30% of a reduction because there was so much duplication between what state did and what USAID did. And it was met with such a furious pushback from Congress and even from congressional Republicans. And it just got completely stonewalled and steamrolled, and it ultimately failed. And we went through briefings and hearings on this for like 2 years, and nothing came about from it. In the first year of Trump 2, Rubio and Trump have shut down. It's gone. USAID is gone, which is just absolutely incredible. So that's a major tangible win. And some people might put it in the foreign policy bucket, but really it's equal parts foreign and domestic, because USAID was essentially just a money laundering scheme for leftist NGOs, many of who are operating here in the United States of America as well. So turning like the Clinton Global Initiative, right? Like Hillary and Chelsea Clinton are getting millions of dollars from the State Department, and they're not just doing stuff overseas with that, they're doing stuff here too. And that's just one example. That's a huge win. Moving on from that, I'd say closely related to that, and of course, representing conservative Southern Baptists who want me to represent them. I don't officially speak for Southern Baptists, of course. Just wins on the religious liberty and the pro-Christian front. Kamala Harris would have been the most anti-Christian president ever, superseding only Joe Biden, who was the most anti-Christian president we've ever had until that point. Kamala Harris was talking about how she was going to make Christian healthcare service providers violate their conscience and cover abortion. And that would have just been the tip of the spear. I mean, we saw under Joe Biden, no-knock raids on pro-life Catholics. The Tennessee 7 that was, facing potentially like life sentences in prison, considering how old some of them were, for just like legally First Amendment protected activities outside of abortion clinics, offering to pray for people and things like that. And so Trump has come in guns blazing, defending the First Amendment and particularly defending Christians. I mean, he's defending the freedom of religion for all people. But they have a combating anti-Christian bias task force that's running and operating. They have this Religious Liberty Commission that's hearing all these cases and considering things that need to be done to reshore the foundations of religious liberty in America, particularly for Christians, because we're the ones who have been losing it more than anybody else, right? Jack Phillips is not a Muslim. He's not a Hindu. He's a Christian who spent 12 years in and out of a massive court battle because he didn't want to bake a cake for a homosexual marriage. And so that's been a huge one. And closely related to that are sort of pro-life issues, which those have been kind of like up and down a little bit in this administration as well. But I still believe that overall the administration is strongly pro-life, pushing for pro-life things. And that's always, we got to kind of hold them accountable on that. But I think this first year has been the most explicitly pro-Christian administration I've ever seen in my life. And I still can't believe that Christians told us we shouldn't vote for this guy.
Absolutely. I know Harmeet Dillon has been doing a fantastic job as well. I had an opportunity a while back to talk with her briefly and thank her just for the work that she's done defending Christians, even though she does not claim the faith. We pray that one day she'll come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But either way, she's been fantastic. Well, I want to shift as well over to foreign policy, because obviously foreign policy is something that's near and dear to the base. And it's one of the things that the Trump administration has the most control over. As the executive, Trump does not have to do too much as far as getting congressional approval for taking executive actions on foreign policy. So talk to us about some of the foreign policy wins. Of course, there's been some ups and downs, and people have been on the edge of their seat with all the things happening, everything from Israel to Venezuela to Iran. But go ahead and break down some of those recent wins that we've seen over the year.
Yeah. So on the foreign policy, Connor, you're right. And this is actually part of the major problem, is that the president of the United States has the ability to act far more unilaterally outside of the boundaries of the United States of America than he does in it. He is like the sovereign of the globe and the mayor of the United States of America. And it's actually a huge issue, because I think at the end of the day, no matter how incredible whatever the wins are in the foreign policy space, that isn't what's going to move the needle in domestic elections. So I share the concerns of a lot of people that the emphasis on foreign policy is going to be problematic, and we really need to pivot back to a huge focus on domestic policy from today through the elections. But one of the reasons why there is this emphasis on foreign policy is because it's just easier to go and fight and win out there than it is here. And so, on that front, what are some of the wins that we've seen? Well, I mean, I think that obviously I talked about shuttering USAID. That's huge. We are communicating to our wayward allies in Europe that we're not going to tolerate their backsliding on basic issues like freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And, J.D. Vance's speech in Munich at the Munich Security Conference last year was incredible, just calling out these corrupt and Marxist European bureaucrats. I'd take that as a huge win. In terms of specific actions abroad, closing the border is a foreign policy win. Re-exerting the Monroe Doctrine and taking control and establishing American sovereignty over the Western Hemisphere, I think is important. And this is a really fine line to walk between sort of an appropriate, massive disdain for neocon interventionist and, democracy building campaigns, foreign adventurism, and American force projection in limited areas where appropriate. I'm not sort of a dyed-in-the-wool non-interventionist, but I am an anti-neocon interventionist, if that difference makes sense. And so what we've seen recently in terms of Venezuela, I think is entirely appropriate. In the modern era, warfare is not just waged by an army showing up on your borders or on your land or missile strikes on your capital. Venezuela and the cartels and many other sort of transnational, organizations have been waging war on American citizens through drug trafficking, through illegal immigration, through other things like that. And for us to take decisive action against, a communist sitting on trillions of dollars of oil in the Western Hemisphere, who's cozied up to some of our biggest enemies like Russia and China, I think that's legitimate. In terms of how it translates into wins for the American people, I think remains to be seen. So Venezuela, I think, was a pretty good example, but we've got to make sure that we don't get high on those, like sort of those wins, and just keep trying to generate more and more like those. If you go back to the strikes on Iran last summer, I was one of the voices who was saying, like, look, we just got to be careful here. We need to be careful. We don't need to get bogged down in another forever war. I wasn't saying that is what would happen. I was just saying that's not what should happen, and that's not what happened, right? So, why do we go bomb Iran? Well, we do it at the behest of an ally of ours, Israel, and because America has said for many years that we have an interest in Iran not developing a nuclear weapon. We don't have to get into all of that, how serious you take that or you don't. But at the end of the day, it was a limited operation. It was a show of American force. You want America, no matter how anti-interventionist you are, no matter how isolationist you are, to use that word and not in a pejorative sense, you want America to be feared by its enemies and respected by its allies. And you want America to be telling its allies around the world that they need to shape up if they're out of line. I think we've seen that largely from this Trump administration. We have incredibly competent individuals running the Department of War, the Secretary, the Department of State, ODNI, things like that. In terms of rebuilding America's military, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has done an incredible job. Like we're making our warfighters great again, and we're not parading around men in dresses doing drag shows on our naval ships, which that alone is a huge win. So sort of, rebuilding our military capabilities. I appreciate Trump's stance and posture towards Zelensky. I got a huge kick out of the White House meeting with Zelensky and Trump and Vance. And look, I think they want to try to find a way to negotiate some sort of peace deal there from a realist perspective. And I wish them well, and I would like to see that war ended. So I think by and large, I would say, a strong B+ to A- on the foreign policy front. We've not started new wars. We're not bogged down overseas anywhere. We got to be careful it doesn't happen. And really, for this year, 2026, we need to emphasize, what are we doing on the domestic front? Because at the end of the day, seizing $17 trillion in oil from Venezuela, I mean, it might bring our gas prices down some, and it maybe already has, but it's not just gas prices that move the needle at the ballot box. It's a lot of other issues too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to his credit, it does seem like the president has begun to focus on domestic. His messaging over the last couple of weeks has been a lot better. He's talking about what he can do to make housing more affordable for especially younger Americans. And of course, that's something that's near and dear to my heart. I very much care a lot about Charlie Kirk's mission of making it so that young people can get married, have kids, and buy a home and participate in the American dream. And I really do think that that is a fundamental issue that seriously needs addressed. I believe economics it's always a top issue, but it's been bouncing back and forth as the number one issue to the voting base. And so I'm very thankful to see the shift happening towards domestic issues. I know we're rapidly running out of time, so feel free to just rapid fire as many additional wins as you want to cover, William.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, on the domestic front, I think, the oil production, I mean, the energy production, sort of like opening. This is a pivot every time between Republican and Democrat administrations. Republican administrations take the shackles off of energy production across the American continent. Democrats put them on. So Trump is, allowing the energy industry to boom again, which that's a good thing. He's empowering the real reindustrialization of a lot of critical sectors in the American economy. He is going after things like, interest rates and grocery prices and doing what he can there. The tariffs are a big piece of this. So like the tariffs are, again, they sit at the direct intersection of domestic and foreign policy. And when you look particularly at the unexpected GDP growth that we have, which again, not everything in the world is green line goes up, but GDP growth is a good thing if it's combined with other sort of issues we've talked about here as well. I think the GDP growth is due in large part to the successful tariff policies that Donald Trump has implemented. A lot of people disagree with me on that. That's fine. But I think Trump is onto something here. I would hate to see the Supreme Court undercut him there. But I've said this in a post before, and I'll say it again here. The first political party in the United States of America that makes it possible for families to purchase a home and hold it on a single income will rule our country for the next 50 years. And I would like that to be the Republican Party. I would like to see that happen under Donald Trump. So that's where my laser focus would be on is how do we make the American dream affordable again? And really that begins with job opportunities for American citizens, in particular American men, and home prices. Those are your two main targets here.
Yeah. And I pray that it can be done under this administration as well. I completely agree with you. Single income families, we need more of that. I mean, that is what America was built on. And ever since America has fallen into the trap that both mom and dad have to be out of the home working, I think that has led to a lot of our cultural decline. And of course, we don't have time to talk about that here. But of course, MAHA has been another incredible development. And of course, RFK Jr. has been doing fantastic stuff. And in fact, the MAHA coalition is arguably the most important part of the Trump coalition that got him over the line in 2024. Very recently, we see that they have officially changed their guidance under the direction of RFK Jr. From, I believe it was 72 vaccines that were required to now 11 under this new guidance from the Trump administration. So we do see that MAHA is starting to make real waves and real changes that hopefully are going to be shifting the mindset of Americans across the board as far as how they interact with the healthcare system. Give me your thoughts on that, William.
Yeah, well, I ate 10 ounces of lamb tonight, so I'm doing my part. But no, that's another thing too. I mean, look, there's so many things we could be talking about here, and even as we're reaching the end of this, in my mind, I'm like, I missed this, I missed that, I missed that. I think people don't understand, and again, I think the point of this conversation is to tell the black pillars to like take a reality pill. You need to get reality pilled here at so many different angles on this Trump administration. We're doing truly revolutionary and positive things. And what RFK Jr. is doing with the FDA, with the vaccine schedule, with getting toxic food dyes and chemicals and poison out of our food system is going to, it's going to reap a lot of incredible benefits for the next generation. And that certainly should not be undercut. I think that's huge. I mean, so much of what we've been told is become, these sort of like consumers plugged into the pod, plugged into the matrix, poisoning our bodies and our minds and squandering our future. And I feel like little by little across the administration, from each different angle that these secretaries are working on, they're trying to give us our future back. And it's huge. And a lot of that begins with our health. So I'm really thankful for what he's doing there. That's a great ad. And there's so many others that could be said.
Absolutely. Well, bottom line, no black pilling. So thank you, William, for joining me. I appreciate it. Feel free to just take a moment as we close here to share about what you're doing with Center for Baptist Leadership, and feel free to plug anything that you have going on.
Yeah, that's right. Look, no black pilling, but always chimp, right? But do it with an attitude of gratitude. Really, I want to say this, Connor, is that I think gratitude is really an important thing here. I think one of the things that's spinning up all this infighting on the right in the conservative podcast, the Jerry Springer right, as I call them sometimes, is just a total lack of gratitude. Like, they're not the men and women in the arena. They're the men and women behind microphones. And the men and women in the arena are actually doing a lot of incredibly positive things, and they deserve our support. And we owe them accountability. Hold them accountable. Ask for more. Push for more, but be thankful for what's happening. What we're doing at Center for Baptist Leadership is our own little institutional battle, or big institutional battle. We're trying to make sure that America's largest Protestant denomination, the Southern Baptist Convention, does not go irrevocably woke, which it isn't. It's pretty bad, but I think we're gaining ground. And we're trying to give conservative Baptists a voice in the public square on critical cultural, spiritual, and political issues that they just haven't had in the last decade. So, I mean, our political representatives have been people like Russell Moore and Brent Leatherwood, Tennessee native. And so, we are trying to build a coalition of like-minded Baptists with backbone who are going to fight for the Southern Baptist Convention, fight for the future of our country, fight for our children. And if you want to be a part of that, I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, William. Really appreciate you joining. And of course, thank you, listeners. I appreciate you guys tuning in as always. It's a huge blessing that you guys support what I do. Feel free to follow me on X at ForgeNA. William, did you give out your handle? I don't think you did.
No, my new handle is just at William Wolfe on X. We got rid of the _E at William Wolfe. You can follow us at Baptist Leaders on X and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Center for Baptist Leadership on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone. I appreciate you listening. Feel free to share this far and wide. It really does help me a lot. And we'll see you next time.